Hello, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm Patrick O'Riordan, the Director of the Department of Building Inspection. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to ask questions, share your perspective, and offer advice on how we can improve. Hearing from you is a critical part of our improvement efforts, and we are fortunate to have you as our partners. Now, we have important updates today about our new damaged building notice, the special inspections removal process, commercial to residential adaptive reuse guidance, and the new ADU permit review roundtable process, and much more. After that, we'll open it up to the floor to general questions and comments so we can hear from you directly about what's working and what we can improve on and how we can better serve you and the city. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to DBI Communications Director Patrick Hannon, who is facilitating today's program.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Kelly Amran is will be coordinating the calls during question and answer period. Kelly, do you want to tell folks how they can participate when the time is right?
Yes, thanks, Patrick. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Public Advisory Forum. If you are joining us on your desktop or on your Microsoft Teams application, and if you have a question, you can click the raise hand button at the top of this meeting window to raise your hand and wait your turn until it is your time to speak. If you are calling in to this meeting over the phone and have a question, you can dial *5 to raise your hand and you'll have to wait your turn. And when I call your name, that's when it's your time to go. You can click on the unmute button if you're on your desktop or a Teams application. If you are calling in over the phone, please dial *6 to unmute. And please state your name and organization if you are representing one. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so our first agenda item is we're going to hear from Monique Mustafa, one of the secretaries for the Building Inspection Commission, about some new opportunities. Monique.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monique, one of the secretaries to the Building Inspection Commission, and we wanted to announce a few vacancies. You can change the slide, please. Thank you. The Board of Examiners has a few open seats. This is a 13-member committee, and they meet to determine whether specific new materials, methods, and types of construction comply with the safety standards in the San Francisco's building codes. The 3 open seats listed here are the licensed electrical engineer, the seismic improvement, tenant and architect, civil or structural engineer, and a licensed general contractor. Next slide, please. And if you are interested or know someone who is interested or can pass along the information, please let them know to submit their letter of interest and resume to our Building Inspection Secretary, Sonia Harris, at the address listed there, or you can submit by email at sfgov.org. Some of the information is this would be a 3-year appointment. The qualifications, one is a San Francisco resident. There is a $125 compensation per meeting, and the deadline to submit is November 15th, 2024. Thank you. And if you have any questions, you can ask now or submit them to the email or call us at the number listed.
Thank you, Monique. Hopefully we'll get some good submissions. Now we're going to turn it over to Matt Green, the Deputy Director for Inspection Services, who's going to present on the damaged building notice and the special inspection removal process. Matt?
Okay, good afternoon.
Matt, you are muted.
Talking as muted. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matt Green, Deputy Director for Inspection Services. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Firstly, I'd like to talk about our new notice that we've been using for a couple of months. It's our damaged building notice. Can we get the next slide, please? So This is a notice, what we used to do is when we get called out to a car into a building or some sort of a tree fell into a building, we issue a notice of violation right away. And we kind of determined that that's not really fair. You're getting damage to your building and the city comes out and we slap a notice of violation on you right away. So as part of the new kinder, gentler DBI, you'll get this correction notice. It's not a notice of violation. It just basically says these are the inspector that you can work with and will help you get through the process of getting the building permits that you need to repair this damage. So, it'll be used when there's damage that needs to be repaired, but it's not serious enough that it's immediate damage to any life or property. So it'll give you all the contact information for the building inspector for your case. And just please reach out to that inspector and they'll guide you through the whole steps to getting a permit, and we'll get you through this process, So it's pretty simple. It looks similar to our stop work notice, but don't consider it a stop work notice. It's actually there to help you and help the building owners get through the process. Is there any questions for this? It's pretty straightforward. No? Okay. We can go down to the special inspections now, please, Kelly. So we've come up with this new process. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that you try to get final inspections on your jobs. There's outstanding special inspections, and there's back and forths about these special inspections. So a lot of times, a special inspection might be required at the plan check stage, and then as the project goes through, either the engineer just realizes, oh, he asked for this special inspection by mistake, or the scope of the work has changed, the special inspection is no longer required. So we do have this process now in place to make it a little more straightforward how you can remove these special inspections from the permit tracking system. You'll just send an email to the regular special inspections email address. It's dbi.specialinspections@sf.org. You'll list, the permit application you're concerned with, the special inspections you think no longer apply. In-house, we'll confer with the plan checker who originally approved the plans, and then we'll determine whether these special inspections no longer apply. Then we can just clear them in the permit tracking system. If the plan checker disagrees, then we might ask you to have a revision permit that's changing the scope of the permit or explaining, exactly why these special inspections aren't required anymore. But it's just more of a straightforward process. You just email the normal email address with a letter explaining why you want these removed, and then we'll review them. I see there's a question there. Can I help you?
Hi, David. Feel free to unmute your mic and ask your question. David Penn.
You want to put your question in the chat, David? It's not working.
Okay, David, we'll come back to you after Matt's presentation. That's all right. Mahmood, I see that you have a question. Please unmute your mic.
Sure. This is Mahmood with Ruben Junius and Rose. I just want to ask, hey, Matt, how are you? So for this formal email, that we submit to the DBI special inspections email, that also comes with you want a letter from the engineer requesting the removal of said items, let's say 2 or 3. So we basically prepare an email, send it to you with the letter from the engineer, and that should be good enough for you guys to do your background work.
Yes, that's what we're asking. Asked for the permit application number, the address, the normal stuff we ask for, so we know exactly what we're looking at. And then
okay, great. Yeah, one last question. So should we include like the plans, like a PDF of the plans and the application? Or...
No, that won't be necessary. Because I know
you guys have access to everything.
Yeah, so that won't be necessary. We can check the plans in our paper vision system. So, but thank you for asking.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Mahmood. And David, we'll try you again. Could you please unmute your mic?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Great. Yes.
Awesome. Hey, I was on my phone and the mic feature didn't seem to work on my phone. Yeah, actually, Mahmood asked most of my questions, but I just wanted to clarify, Matt, that when we send this in this case, it will be you and your team or the special inspection team that goes and discusses with the plan checker who approved the relevant project. And then if there's some additional information needed at that point, the follow-up action item would come back to the applicant. But that initial coordination with the plan checker will be done by you and your staff?
That is correct.
Okay, great. That was my question. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, David.
Are there more questions?
No more questions. Feel free to proceed.
Well, that about wraps it up. So like if there's no real follow-up, we'll clear the item in the permit tracking system. You can all check that online. And if it's possible that the plan checker will need more calculations, and then we'll reach out to the engineering record there, and then we'll figure this out. But we're here, we're here to work with you. We want to make this process as clear, as simple as possible for everybody. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Now we're going to move on to the next agenda item. We have Carrie Birnbach from the Office of Small Business to walk us through the change of use designation and permit exemptions legislation. Take it away, Carrie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to review this legislation that passed earlier this month and is effective mid-November, sponsored by Mayor Breed. Next slide. The goal of this legislation is to reduce the number of barriers small businesses experience when they're trying to open a new storefront and remove costly architectural plan requirements when businesses apply for change of use permits and no alterations are involved. Lastly, this defines when building permits are required. Next slide. Sorry, this is no longer proposed legislation. It has passed, just clarify that. This legislation clarifies that building permit applications for a change of use shall not require architectural or professional plans if all of the following are true. The established designation is A, B, or M occupancy, and the new use remains within that classification. As long as occupant load stays the same or decreases, no alterations are being made, and the space doesn't require changes to electrical or plumbing systems. So in certain scenarios, a business could utilize dimension drawings instead of formal architectural plans for change of use projects under these specific circumstances. And as always, whenever construction or alteration work is required, a building permit is still required. Next slide. And this legislation makes permanent an existing pilot program that exempts businesses undergoing change of use projects from producing architectural plans. Hiring an architect and paying for those plans is timely and costly. Through this pilot program, our office has assisted roughly a dozen businesses with this. So it's not a huge amount, but it does mean a lot for the businesses that are able to use this. The best example of why this is needed is in the past when a limited restaurant under planning code gets a liquor license and adds beer to its menu. They're not making any structural changes to the business, no construction, anything like that. But they are changing from a limited use restaurant to a full service restaurant in planning code. And therefore they have to submit architectural drawings with their permits. So this helps examples like that, just ease the permitting process and get them done a little faster. Happy to answer questions. Looks like there's one.
Yes, it looks like we have a question from David Penn. David, please unmute and let us know your question.
Thank you. Carrie, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I just question about the uses that this is limited to. You said A, B, or M?
It is, yeah, it has to stay within A, B, or M occupancies. And all and the other like bullet points that I listed, not just one of those, but all of them.
Yes, got it. 10-4. And I guess so it could go from B to A or A to B or A to M, any one of those.
No, I believe it has to be within the classification it's currently in.
Okay, got it. Okay, that was my question.
Great. Thank you, David. Do we have any more questions? Oh, looks like that's it. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Next up, we're going to hear from DBI's compliance manager, Chris Vergara, on new gift restrictions. Take it away, Chris.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Vergara, the compliance manager for DBI. I got a very short presentation for you involving Proposition D, one line item of Proposition D regarding the new gift restrictions. So if we could go to the first slide. So just by way of background, Prop D was initiated by the Ethics Commission back in 2023. It was passed in March 5th, 2024, and just became effective in October 12th, 2024. So there's been changes to the city law, and one of the changes is it clarifies and expands the city's rules against gifts from restricted sources. So previously, the restricted source rule simply said San Francisco city law prohibits all city officers and employees from soliciting or accepting gifts from restricted sources. So that rule has been expanded, and they expanded the prohibition of gifts to state, number one, solicit, coordinate, facilitate, or accept any gift of themselves or any other city official if the officer or employee knows or has reason to know that source of the gift is a restricted source. So essentially they added the terminology coordinate and facilitate, and it's not even if you just know, it's if you even have reason to know the source is a gift from a restricted source. Secondly, it says solicit or accept the gift from any person, including a city department, if the officer or employee knows or has reason to know that the gift was funded, provided, or directed by a restricted source. So this was implemented because there was instances of circumvention of the rule by the restricted source giving the gift to intermediary, and the intermediary would give it to a staff member here. So we staff members won't be able to say, well, I didn't get it from a restricted source. If they had reason to know the gift was indirectly from a restricted source, that gift would be prohibited as well. Additionally, solicit or accept any gift from a restricted source for any of their family members. So these are instances of the restricted source gave the gift to the staff member's spouse or a relative or whatnot, and then the staff member tries to argue, well, I didn't receive the gift, it was actually from my wife. That wouldn't be permissible as well. That would be a prohibition of the restricted source rule as well. Next slide. Okay, and then the second thing they did with the restricted source rule is expanded the definition of what is a restricted source. So as of now, it means anyone doing business with DBI, essentially. Anyone, so previously it usually means just contractors, anyone contracting or seeking to contract with DBI. They expanded that provision, line item A there, by including all affiliates of anyone who's contracted with DBI. So that would mean any board of directors, principal officers, or any people that own 10% or more of ownership of that restricted source, they would be considered affiliate of the restricted source and be a restricted source themselves. And they would be a restricted source for a period of 12 months. And you'll see that 12 months time frame referenced in a lot of these definitions, and that's typically the duration of how long they're a restricted source. Line item B is license permit seekers or holders. So anyone involved in any proceedings, this is new, this wasn't previously in the restricted source rule, but it's anyone involved in proceedings regarding non-ministerial permits, licenses, or other entitlements or use. So anyone doing business with DBI in terms of filing for a permit or seeking a permit, they would be considered a restricted source, and it's 12 months from the duration of the action taken on the item. And if it's a item that requires departmental approval, like it's approved by a department head or a board of soup or a commissioner, then that would be a restricted source for the entire department. Additionally, they added additional restricted sources, a person who is during the prior 12 months attempted to influence the officer or employee in any legislative or administrative action, and permit consultants registered with the Ethics Commission if the permit consultant has reported any contacts with the employees or the officers department in the previous 12 months. So those are all relatively new definitions to the restricted source, and it basically expands it to anyone doing business with the department. Another thing I want to mention is exceptions that no longer apply. So there's a laundry list there, but previously we were able to accept food and drink to be shared to the office. That's no longer permissible. So if any restricted source attempts to give our department a fruit basket for the holidays, we'd have to reject it because we're no longer permitted to take it. Gifts received from longtime friends, gifts exchanged from birthdays and holidays, gifts received in the home of a restricted source, all of them are no longer apply and would be restricted from us from accepting. The exceptions that do apply are routine office courtesies of $25 or less up to 4 times a year at the restricted source of business. So these are instances when our staff goes out to a restricted source place of business for perhaps a training, and you guys give out some pens, notepads, coffee, tea, water, bagels, anything in that regard that's routine office courtesies. We could accept that up to $25 up to 4 times a year, but it doesn't include alcohol, doesn't include expensive meals of like $100 per plate or whatnot. Those won't be permitted. The last exception is free attendance at a widely attended conference, convention ceremony, but only where its attendance is necessary to the official duties of the officer employee, or if we're performing a ceremonial role. Say we're a guest speaker at one of our nonprofits that we find and we're attending this big event, we'd be able to accept free admission to that. We just can't accept travel expenses or a flight, hotel, anything of that nature to attend the event. We won't be able to accept it, but free attendance at the widely attended conference or convention or ceremony we're able to take. So the bottom line with all these new ethics rules regarding gift giving is DBI will not accept any gift. If we do take in a gift, we have 2 options to remedy it. We have to give the gift back immediately within 30-day time frame, or we could donate it to a nonprofit and we can't take the tax deduction on it. So we had to ungift the gift if you give us a gift. So it's better safe sorry, just don't give any gifts to any DBI members. And I'm open to any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Do we have any questions from the audience? No? All right. Looks like we're ready to jump into the next topic.
Terrific. Thanks, Chris. And now we're going to move on to our Deputy Director for Permit Services, Neville Pereira, who's going to present on 3 items: commercial to residential adaptive reuse, our new ADU roundtable, and our new permit issuance stamp. Neville, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. So as many of you know, there's been a very large hue and cry for us to respond or come up with some provisions that facilitate adaptive reuse, not only from our customers, developers, and designers, but internally from the city as well. And so we put together a series of an information sheet in order to respond to some of the questions that we can anticipate regarding these. So why? Just a little bit of background. The reason why we look to adaptive reuse of downtown is because downtown is the engine for the San Francisco economy. Nearly 80% of San Francisco's gross domestic product is from downtown customers. The downtown office core was home to 70% of the jobs during the pre-pandemic times, as well as nearly half of our sales revenue. And 95% of our business tax revenue came from downtown. And some of you may think, well, okay, adaptive reuse is focusing on converting commercial to residential. since a lot of our revenue is coming from business tax, why are we converting to residential? The following slides will help answer that question. So let's go to the next slide. There's a lot going on here. This slide is broken out into 3 sections. The graph essentially shows the response of various factors over the last couple of years through the pre-pandemic and through the pandemic. The right side of the slide shows the response or the 9 strategies that have been identified by the city, as well as the 30 by 30 initiative that Mayor Breed came out with. So looking at the graph, first of all, we can see that the sharp response to COVID during the January 2020 all the way through 2023, how we had a significant drop in office attendance, went from 100% down to around 12%, and is currently at around 43%. Vacancy rate went from 6%, which is typically a sign, anything from 6% or below is a sign of a healthy vacancy rate in a downtown area, went up to 17% and is now even at 37% as of September 2024. Sales tax revenue dropped significantly to 26 and then raised up to about 36%. And then hotel occupancy also dropped significantly and is on the way up. If you can imagine, typical city, COVID aside, is trending upwards, with a healthy economy. The sharp downturn that we had and the somewhat shallow slope of the increase of all of these indicators indicate that the city is in need of some extra stimulus here. Looking at the 9 strategies, the third item down, looking at facilitating new uses and flexibility in buildings, as well as, a host of other provisions that the planning department has partnered with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development is also part of the strategy here to bring more life back into downtown, not only from a commercial and office and business perspective, but also to bring residences into the downtown area. There was a recent meeting that we jointly held with the American Institute of Architects. It just happened last week, in fact, where there was that group had done a study looking at Melbourne, Australia, in comparison with San Francisco. And it was determined that because Melbourne had a lot more residents in the downtown area, they were able to recover a lot quicker than San Francisco was. And so we need to get that mixed use into the downtown area. The 30-30 initiative, many of you are familiar with this, introduces 5 million square feet of housing for about 5,000 units, and about 10,000 new residents by 2030, to build 5,000 of those units in new residential projects, as well as welcome another 10,000 residents across the downtown area, and then bring in students as well as improve downtown's public realm and to serve the future better. And if you guys have questions about that later, I know Liz Waddy and planning are in the meeting. You can ask that later. Next slide, please. This talks about DBI's approach to adaptive reuse and how we first implemented looking at this back in July of 2023, just prior to the mayor's executive directive and the change in the building code that asked DBI to look at alternate means to help facilitate adaptive reuse. This happened about August 2023. In about three or 4 months or so, DBI released its first draft of its information sheet, G29, and very soon after there, within about a couple of weeks, we were approached by the architectural group, Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill, who had been a part of a previous stakeholder group meeting looking at tall buildings and suggested that we do the same here when looking at this information sheet. Basically convene a group of stakeholders from the design community, not only architectural, but structural, as well as some developers and other stakeholders into the group. So that was around November 2023. Within a month or so, we were meeting on a monthly basis, so shortly, thereabouts. And what was really interesting is that within a couple of months of starting, within I think the second month of starting, DBI received an application for a project that really shone a light on this thing and gave it a realism that really forced the entire team to look at this very seriously, because these were items that were brought up in the project specifically and made us look at some of our provisions a lot harder. Our final stakeholder meeting was around June, which is about 6 months after we started, and we released our information sheet final version of it in September. Next slide. So we want to let everybody know that DBI is a partner in these adaptive reuse projects and should be incorporated as far in advance as possible. Even if you just starting looking at a building, the entire city family, in fact, not only DBI, but the planning department, the fire department, wants to be a partner in these projects. So what we did is in looking at these projects, we scoured all of the codes from the building code, the fire code, the existing building codes, and the historical building code. There's a fair number of these buildings in the downtown area that are historical buildings. And so we looked at all of these codes and really culled or consolidated all of the provisions that our stakeholders were interested in. Things like building envelope, energy, structural, exiting, so on and so forth. So we'll go into that a little bit later. Once we brought all these things and put them into a single source document, we also looked at local provisions that were local city amendments in the building code and reviewed that or analyzed those within the context of whether they were reasonable. And because we are governed by the state code and we cannot go any less than the state code, we have a little more flexibility with the local amendments. We started to look at the local amendments to see if we had that flexibility. We also made a commitment internally to prioritize pre-application conferences. So as soon as you're ready with your projects or you're analyzing projects, please come to us. We'll prioritize those meetings, as well as we've codified making these projects priority projects for plan checks. So once you submit them from a DBI perspective, you will be assigned a plan checker within a week after the project, the permit, the application has been deemed complete. And then within the next week or however large the project is, you'll get responses back, at least from DBI. But from the city's perspective, we've also prioritized these housing projects that create housing units. Next slide. Okay, so what we've done, the next couple of slides will tell you, and I'll go over this at a very high level, the items that are concerned from a building department perspective, and I'll go over a slide for the fire department perspective. We got categories in G29. If you don't know that document yet, go up to our building safety website, DBI website, and under resources, you'll find it under information sheets. It's in that block of building codes, administrative bulletins, and information sheets, and then look up G29. So we look at what it takes to review the building envelope. Exterior walls and opening protection, especially for existing buildings that, they may have existing non-rated openings close to the property line or at the property line, whereas now the residential use will require that non-rated wall to be rated at least from both sides. We'll look at the means of egress for the building and analyze whether it's good enough for the proposed use. Sometimes single stairs are a part of these existing buildings, or they may be fire escape issues in historic buildings. So that's covered in there. We'll look at interior environment and lighting. Some of you may know that San Francisco has a localized amendment for lighting, for natural lighting in residential uses, whereas the state code allows mechanical lighting or artificial lighting. San Francisco does not. However, we've got a couple of built-in administrative bulletins that deal with this and show how you can borrow light from external openings. So that will help facilitate these adaptive reuse projects. Looking at efficiency units as well. What's the minimum unit size minimum size of unit you can put if you're proposing an efficiency dwelling unit, and make some concession there. Next slide, please. The big topic is how the DBI looks at seismic for these types of buildings. There's a large contingent of older concrete buildings in our building stock, and we cover that in this administrative bulletin, as well as accessibility in using the Federal Housing Act. Look at high-rise buildings as well as historical building code and the San Francisco building code. Next slide, please. Lastly, the fire department put in a very nice, concise treatise of its fire requirements. Here are about 5 of those. Looking at fire sprinkler systems, this is actually a required item. So an existing building will have to put in fire sprinklers, and actually this is a win-win for both the fire department, building department, and the applicant. There's a lot more the project can gain from installation of fire sprinklers from not only a fire life safety perspective, but also if you're looking at other alternatives to the fire code or building code, fire sprinklers go a long way to help justifying those alternatives. The fire alarm is required, and smoke alarms and carbon monoxide sensors are required. A lot of these adaptive reuse projects gut out the innards of a building, and so it makes sense to when you put in the new residential spaces that they be covered by smoke alarms and carbon monoxide sensors. There are some alternatives that are possible as far as other signaling devices, such as two-way ECS communications. We'll go through the building. The fire department will go through the building and check that they have radio communication for the emergency responder, emergency response radio communications. And if they don't get a signal, then we'll talk about putting in a full ERSCS system. And then the big questions are regarding gurney sizing of elevators. You'll be happy to know that gurney sizing of elevators is left to whatever is existing. So there's no upgrades there, nor are they is the fire department asking for hoistway construction upgrades or FEO operations to the elevators as well. Smoke control, at the minimum, we require that the ventilation system, your AC and heating systems, and all your ducts be that system shut down upon activation of a smoke alarm. But again, we want to have that communication with you as soon as you have your project and you have some of the building features identified. And Kelly, I think that's about it, right? That's the last. Yep. Okay, I'm open to questions if you have it.
Thanks, Neville. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, it looks like we have one from Gary G. All right, Gary. Are you able to unmute your mic? Okay, I will come back to you. It looks like we have another question from Elmer Lynn. All right, Elmer, please unmute your mic and feel free to ask your question. Okay, Elmer, we'll come back to you. Next in line is Jeremy Paul. Jeremy, please take it away. And just a reminder for folks, if you're joining us on your desktop or on Microsoft Teams, you can click the raise button to raise your hand. And if you're calling in to this meeting over the phone and have a question, you can dial *5 to raise your hand and wait your turn. And when I call your name, you can click on the unmute button. And if you're calling in over the phone, you can dial *6 to unmute. Just a reminder for everyone. Jeremy, are you able to unmute your mic? All right, we'll come back to you. Janine Cotter, would you be able to unmute your mic?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. I apologize, but it took me a long time to get into Microsoft Teams for some reason. Is this a public forum question time to ask anything, or is this directed question time?
This is directed to the presentation that I just did on adaptive reuse of office to residential. Do you have something else you want to talk about?
I have something else that I would like to talk about. So if there's time for public comment later or questions later, I'd like to reserve time for later.
Let's do it then.
Yep.
Thanks, Janine.
I will. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And apologies.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Janine. We'll come back to you in a bit. Gary G, are you able to unmute your mic? I see you have a question. All right, I'll come back to you shortly. Elmer Lynn, we'll give it another shot. Would you be able to unmute your mic? Okay, I think we will have to come back to Gary and Elmer after the next presentation.
Okay, let's move on then.
Okay.
Patrick, did you want to announce the next one, or should I just jump into it?
Just go for it, Neville.
Jump into it.
Okay,
Good. Which Patrick?
Patrick H, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So this next topic here is pretty exciting as part of our next phase of efficiencies. The Permit Review Roundtable is a partnership between actually all the departments that are involved with development review. We were looking at a way to find a medium by which that's marginally over the threshold that we know as over the counter, which most of you know is an hour's worth of review, and to be able to test this medium for larger projects, anywhere from an hour to a couple of hours of review. We are looking at this or piloting this project for a very specific range of projects, and these are projects associated with state and hybrid ADUs, and they're frequent enough and yet, few and far between that we can test this medium to be able to go forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so the reason for this is to create a virtual customer focus plan check similar to the over-the-counter experience, but it's going to be a virtual experience that basically looks that it can be slotted in between our binary choices today. Today we have the choice of going over the counter or in-house, and so the permit review roundtable slots in there right in between. It's meant to provide a more an enhanced customer and staff experience, more predictable, that uses the universal portal that we have set up for in-house review, and also give us improved communication with the customer, and shepherd the process through a series of meetings, hopefully 2 meetings. It's more efficient in that complete plans are required upfront, as they are with any in-house project. And then we will convene a single meeting with all of the stakeholders, the design professional, and all of the agencies that were involved with that review, give you a consolidated list of comments, and allow that collaboration at that one meeting. It'll be expedient. It will require that the project be moved faster than the rest of our in-house projects. It'll have a separate track altogether than our in-house projects. So, and I'll explain that in a moment. And it'll reduce the number of rechecks, first of all, as well as guide the applicant through the process. And lastly, it'll be cost effective. There's no additional cost for this service, and there'll be no need for the Bluebeam software or to purchase anything to participate in the meetings. Next slide, please. So this is hard to read for most of you, but it essentially lays out virtually the exact same process that we currently have with our in-house review. And Kelly, I just realized I can't use my cursor on this screen, correct? So
Yeah.
let me walk you through. Okay, thanks. Essentially, you start on the left side of the screen, or the workflow here. You come in through the online portal, and a decision is made whether you are a new submission for a new project or a resubmission of an existing project. We'll assume it's a new submission, so you'll go downwards from the diamond down to the triage state. We will do our triage to make sure you're not a duplicate application. And this is all currently what we do today for all projects. Moving to the right of that, if everything is okay, then we will send it to all departments for review to make sure that each department has a chance to look at it for applicability. The departments will start to realize whether they're part of the review or not applicable to that review, and they'll mark that there. If they are a part of the review, they will check for completeness at that point. For ADU projects, the planning department will review this and determine whether it's eligible for the state and hybrid program, or if it's a local ADU program, it will revert back to a normal processing. Okay, once that determination is made, a completeness check, if the application is complete, at this point a completeness letter is issued. And what everybody gets that's involved with this, again, the people that are involved are the design professional, the applicant, and all departments that are part of the review, as well as our CPB team. Everyone in that team then gets an email or an appointment set up at least 2 weeks in advance. So you will get, as soon as your application is deemed complete, you will get an email notification with an appointment time 2 weeks in the future, saying that you will need to show up for this meeting to get your comments back and to be able to talk to all the departments in unison. At that meeting, it will be determined, actually at that meeting, all plan reviewers from all departments will come to that meeting already with the project reviewed. You, the applicant, will get your comments therein, as well as a marked up set of plans and a complete list of not only your corrections, but also all the fees and everything you need to do, your school district processes, your PUC connections, you name it, everything will be right there for you. It'll be an opportunity for the design professional to go over all the comments and make sure they have a clear understanding, negotiate, or actually I won't say negotiate, but answer some of the comments right there and then. And then once that meeting is over, typically that meeting will be for about 45 minutes or so. The applicant or the design professional walks away with all of that information emailed to them. Again, this is a virtual meeting, so they don't, when I say walk away, they'll disengage from the meeting with all that information in their possession. There'll be an agreement that there be a second meeting at that point, assuming that you have comments. You will come back at some point with your corrections done, and we'll have the same sort of meeting to go over the comments there. And it's expected that meeting be a final meeting, but again, things happen, and we'll be able to discuss that at that point. Ideally, at that second meeting, all the comments will be done. Every department will be able to sign off on the project right there and then in front of the applicant. And essentially, the permit application becomes ready to issue. At that point, the applicant can make an appointment with our Central Processing Bureau to be able to pay the fees and sign all the declarations, so on and so forth. Next slide. So just to reiterate some of the fundamentals here, the preferred method is to have a maximum of 2 scheduled meetings. The first meeting to receive the comments and to be able to dialogue with all the departments, as you would do if you walked into the counter for the first time fresh. The only difference is that we want the design professional or the designer, whoever is responsible for changing the plans, they must be in the meeting, so that whoever's responsible for changing the plans can truly understand what the intent of the comments are right there and then without any translation. That's not to say other parties cannot be part of that. If you have an authorized agent or the owner wants to be part of that, they can be there too. All pertinent agencies will come to that meeting with written plan check comments, so they'll be there ready to discuss this with you, and all fees and processes will be there for the applicant in writing, and the permit technician will be able to go through that with the design professional. DBI will take on the responsibility of coordinating and scheduling the meetings. And we have understanding from all the departments associated with this process: fire, planning, PUC, public works, and DBI, that staffing is guaranteed for this process. This is only at the beginning of the pilot project for state and hybrid ADUs and possible future expansion, assuming the program goes well. And then lastly, the customer will not be a part of the Bluebeam session, because we're piloting an asynchronous method of checking plans for future use. If you can imagine, well, let's not talk about that for now. but there's a reason for not including the applicant in with the Bluebeam session. Next slide. We're leveraging a lot of our existing infrastructure, so the online portal and completeness check will be used. We will reserve the first 4 hours of Monday mornings for now, just because that slot of time has been deemed to be most eligible for this sort of a program. So our plan checkers will reserve this time from here on in. People that are involved with this program will reserve this time. But if there is no appointment, it's not like we're just waiting around for people, right? There has to be an appointment in order to sequester this time of our plan checkers. So if there is no appointment, they'll be doing their normal work. We'll be using Microsoft Outlook for this, and we'll be sending out invitations to you to be able to schedule that in your calendars. We'll be using email that will be by DBI staff. And like I said, we got guaranteed staffing from all departments associated with this. Next slide. We'll come prepared with written comments. Comments can be verified. Oh, this is something else too. So over the counter today, most of you have to meet with the person that wrote the comments. Whereas here, there's a primary and a backup for every department. So it's not only is a staffing guaranteed, but a primary, whoever wrote the comments, and there'll be a backup to that person. So if somebody is not able to make that meeting, that backup person will serve for that department at that meeting. If a department writes a comment, it's a departmental comment. It's not an individual comment. So anyone within that department will be able to verify those comments. And we have an agreement that it's other than glaring other issues that the secondary person may be looking at, they'll essentially hold you to just passing those original comments. We want the designer, I want to stress this, we want the designer or the design professional to be part of the meeting. And each plan reviewer will be able to discuss these comments with the design professional with a complete understanding of what needs to happen in order to issue the permit, or at least approve get the permit ready to issue at the next meeting. Next slide. The applicant, the design professional, will walk away from that first meeting, or at least leave that meeting with a consolidated list of comments, a set of marked up plans, as well as the cost estimate of all the fees, as well as whatever process is needed. So school district, all those other things that you need to do before you get your permit. Our permit technician at the next meeting will make sure all of those things are done. So those become part of your plan check corrections, whereas before, maybe CPB was not part of the comments. At least they will release you a list of instructions of what needs to be done. Next slide. And lastly, we want to talk about the limitations of this process. It's not a paper project. You'll be using our online portal, so they'll be submitted electronically. This second item is a tolling declaration. This the word tolling means that you get to pause the time. State ADUs and hybrid ADUs have a timeline associated whereby if we cannot approve the project or we cannot review it within 60 calendar days, we are obligated to deny it. So just know that at the beginning of the process, we will ask the applicant whether you agree to pause the time when the project is in your possession. This gives you extra time to be able to deal with the corrections and so on and so forth. But you will have to agree in writing that you agree to pause that time, to toll that time while it's in your possession. So the clock doesn't advance while it's in your possession. If you also have the option of not tolling the time, or not pausing time, where that tells us, the building department or the city, that when it gets to within a certain amount of time to that 60 days, and you haven't responded to our notification that time is due, we have the option of denying the application. You'll have to start again, and we'll talk about what that looks like for you. So that's required. This is only for state and hybrid ADUs, not for the local ADU program, and no significant additional associated work with the project. So if you're building a brand new 3-unit apartment and you're sticking an ADU, that's not what this is meant for. This is meant for discrete, either junior ADUs or ADUs within an existing building or detached from an existing building. That's what's eligible for this program. So yes, you can propose a detached accessory dwelling unit, and we will check it with this program. And again, I have to stress the fact that the design professional must be present. And if that design professional is not present, we cannot continue with that meeting. Okay, so I'll stop there. Kelly, open for questions.
Yes, before we move on to questions, I just want to let you know that we've opened up the chat. So in case you've been having trouble calling in with your questions, or if you prefer, we've opened up the chat. Feel free to type in your questions and I will check the chat periodically and get to those as well. All right. So does anyone have questions for Neville from the Department of Building Inspection, or Natalia Fossey and Elizabeth Waddy from San Francisco Planning, who are also in this meeting?
Fire department too, as well, Kelly.
Yes, the Department of Building Inspection as well. Oh, fire department. Yes, we also have Kathy from SF Fire on the call. David Penn, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. Exciting program. Excited to go through it with you all. My question really is just a kind of a technical question. Neville, you mentioned that the applicant would not be invited to join the Bluebeam session for this pilot program, but I'm assuming you will still be using Bluebeam. It's just that it won't be open to the applicant. Is that correct?
That's correct, David. Yes, and there's a reason for that. We want to test out this concept of asynchronous use of Bluebeam. What that means is that you're not in their session with us. We internally will use the Bluebeam session to communicate internally to the system, to the city, and then publish you the corrections one time. There's been some issues, having the applicant in the Bluebeam session. Again, we just want to be able to pilot this and see how it will lend itself to an expanded use of this program.
Nope, understood. Great. I just was curious if a new system or platform is being used, but that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, David. And it looks like we have a very first question in our chat. Hello, Elmer. Elmer says, great. Couldn't find the mic toggle. What if building has existing elevator that is not gurney capable but meets CBC 11B? Will it be required to be upgraded? Also, are speaker strobes required to be added to fire alarm if none exists?
Okay, so this is related to the previous presentation on adaptive reuse. So Elmer, we will leave the elevator alone as far as gurney sized. The fire department has reviewed this and has determined that gurney resizing the elevator obviously is impractical. And as far as meeting 11B, 11B would be public housing, right, Elmer? So either 11A or 11B. It would be appropriate to upgrade the operational buttons and so on and so forth, instead of going into the cab and making changes to the hoistway and stuff like that. So yeah, we would ask, and again, Elmer, I want to make sure that you understand that because we're going into an existing building, and assuming that there's private funding on this thing, there are no 11A changes that are required off this of this building for accessibility. If it is public funding, then it becomes then we would ask for those FHA minimal standards there. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, and this is Kathy with Fire. If I could just address the second part of the question.
Yeah.
About if you have an existing fire alarm system that doesn't have strobe or speakers, will they be required to be installed? So yes, the fire alarm will be required to come up to current NFPA 72 standards. So that includes low frequency sounders. But yeah, an existing fire alarm system will need to be brought up to code. And just to add to with elevators, yes, the fire department's not requiring you to increase the size of existing elevators to comply with the Gurney code, but we want the elevators to be as code compliant. So if you're dealing with a high-rise building, as far as putting lights in the shaft, if they're fire access, the building is a height that requires fire access elevators. Also elevator lobbies. We're looking for that in high-rise buildings. But we understand space may be limited, and so we're willing to comply with the code the best that the existing building will allow us to. But we recognize that some things aren't feasible. So so we're look at the building as a whole and accept equivalencies where it's not feasible and does not affect life safety to come up to current code.
You're muted, Kelly.
Great. Thank you, Neville and Kathy. And thank you, Elmer, for your question. Next up, we have Anne Cervantes. Anne, I have unmuted you. Feel free to ask your question.
I want to applaud the DBI department and really the effort they've put in coordination and taking a leadership of moving projects most expeditiously through the permitting process. I just have to say, this is just great that you have these outreach meetings. But Neville, when you say that you have an agreement with all departments, does that include DPW? Because that's where the holdup is on a lot of the projects. You guys have done an excellent job in making sure that things do get moving forward. But I think you're going to talk about to a lot of architects here. It's the holdup is DPW. Do you have an agreement with them?
Yeah, and on the ADU, the permit review roundtable, we do have agreement from them. Just know that some of these projects will not have a DPW component to it. We do know that Bureau of Forestry will be included on almost any of these because there's a street planting requirement, I believe, whenever you add a unit. So we've found a way to incorporate those those folks in with the process in concept, and DPW has agreed to this, and we just need to prove it out.
Here's my problem. I don't know if DPW has a backlog of what it is, but to unblock that backlog, because I have one project that I just did of the goodness of my heart, helping someone smooth out their permitting process so they could get an ADU in. 6 years later, I get comments back from DPW, from the civil department, on changes in sidewalk. 6 years later, and there's a new process to begin. And the other one is most currently, I think their intake review is getting a little bit ridiculous for those civil engineers that have 35 to 40 years of experience, and the person reviewing not understanding that there's a north arrow on the job. they've gone back 3 or 4 times, and it's just not acceptable when you're trying to get a project done and you get, it's luckily that we are ahead of our occupancy. If it was a brand new building, this way of handling the intake is actually gotten very ridiculous for this consultant. And I'm just speaking up to the behalf, but I hear that all the time, mostly from the civil engineers that I use for various projects around the city. So if that could get cleaned up, that would really make this process even smoother with all the work that you've done. But I applaud that you have all these agreements done. But, you know, if there's a backlog, they need to look at outsourcing those things to catch up and not to hold up a project from 1 to 3 years. So, you know, that permit, that occupancy permit is really important because there's funding gaps, there's financing gaps, that if they don't look at what the project deadline is and coordinate with the people within DBI, the inspectors, the plan checkers, and everything to close out a project, then all your work is for naught.
Right. I appreciate your input, and it honestly sounds like that one project is an outlier. Let me tell you what Liz Waddy, the planning department, and us did with the other departments. We met with each individual department to talk about this commitment to this program. And in addition to the primary and the secondary that the departments have committed to, we've also got the commitment of having a supervisor where DBI can escalate to at any time. So this is one of the things that hopefully will address your issue. We want to approach this as a one city, from a one city perspective, and so with that approach, everyone becomes a stakeholder in this, to making this work. And because we have the primary, the secondary, and the escalation supervisor, we believe we've covered the scenarios here. Again, we just need to test it, and hopefully it'll all turn out. So thank you for your comment.
The last thing, I've got all different types of project types, is the ABE program. We've got small property owners and they come in and they want to comply with the ABA program. But at the same time, they want to comply with redoing their toilet rooms and upgrading elsewhere to comply with code, the accessible code. And what I'm finding out is that you guys have separated those packages, the ABE and separate from the interior renovations on the toilet rooms. That gets expensive for those small property owners or the small tenant improvements. So you might take a look in that and how you can merge those together so the small property owner doesn't get overwhelmed with all these costs in doing two permit processes.
Sure. Sure.
Just throwing that comment out.
Yeah, and I get that. One thing I would advise you, Amy, on these projects where your customer wants to consolidate 2 types of projects, you can do ABE all day over the counter. And these interior tenant improvements sometimes are small enough where we can do those as well. We ask you when you come in whether this is associated with the Accessible Business Entrance Program. It's just a matter of identifying that ABE number on the permit application. But there's honestly nothing that requires you to separate those out. I know some people do, and it could just be that you came in the process at different times, but you can certainly do those as one project.
Now, right? Yeah. Now, currently, because
yes, now you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. Next, we have a question from Gary G. Gary, please unmute your mic. Oh, looks like you've
Gary,
lowered your hand.
well, I see Gary's hand still up. Gary, are you, well, I don't know. You can't tell us whether you're on a phone. Is there a code or something he needs to punch on his code?
Yeah, to
On his
unmute,
phone to, yeah.
Gary, to unmute, you would have to dial *6 if you're on the phone. If you're on the Teams application, you would click unmute at the top. And feel free to also use the chat as well and type in your question, and we'll get to you shortly, Gary. Gary said in the chat, I've withdrawn my question. Okay, thanks for letting us know. Okay, does anyone have any more questions from the audience?
I just want, Kelly, I just want, I just want to clarify one thing. I just heard from my plan check manager that sometimes separating the ABE program from the rest of your project has its benefits in that you can take care of your ABE a little faster. You don't have to worry about the NOVs and all that kind of stuff that you may have for your other building. But honestly, Amy, if it's a clean project and all they want to do is a interior tenant improvement, restrooms or whatever, that's an over-the-counter project, and we can do that with an ABE type. Can consolidate that. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, Kelly.
Great, thanks, Neville. And we have a question from David Penn. David, take it away.
Appropriate time for? Thank you. Is this an okay time for general questions or?
David, hold on a second, if you can. I'll just answer Jeremy Paul's question on the CHBC limitations. So if your building is designated as a historical building, we will those provisions are pretty well defined in the historical building code. That's volume 10 or off the California code. And so the historical buildings are allowed to take the biggest concessions that I know of is that when for exiting, for example, you can go into an existing building and use fire escapes as a second means of egress from that building, as long as they meet the provisions of our administrative bulletin. What was that? AB 19, I believe, for the use of fire escapes. There are other things that you get on a historical building as far as building envelope, being able to preserve your existing walls and insulation value from an energy perspective. Will allow you to maintain those. There have been some conversations that we've had. Well, can you keep the ceiling heights and so on and so forth the same? If it's a 7-foot ceiling or something thereabouts. If you're keeping the interior spaces the same to preserve historical value, you got a fresco on the ceiling or the plasters of a certain vintage that just adds to the historical nature of it. Yes, you can keep those existing rooms the way they are. Usually what happens with these types of projects, though, the developer will come in and really do a significant remodel on the inside in order to create new spaces. Instead of a central core of restrooms, for example, in a commercial space, then you distribute those to all the units on the floor. So what we've typically seen, and that's not to say that these are going to be the same in the future, but we've seen a complete gut out on the inside, and the interiors do change. We want to preserve the exterior elements of the building as much as possible, especially if the facades are historical. So again, windows can stay the same as far as lighting and so on and so forth. We want to preserve those exterior openings as much as we can. Hopefully that gives you some some concept, Jeremy. If you want to know more, let's come on in and have a conversation about it.
Great. Thanks, Neville. Thanks, Jeremy. David, feel free to take it away with your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I just two questions. I'll try to make it very quick. Neville, they're both for you. One is you've hired a lot of engineers, and that's been great. But it seems like there is now a little bit of a shortage of non-structural plan checkers, and I just wanted to see if you had any sort of information or update you could provide on that. The second thing is I think it would be great if DBI could issue an information sheet or possibly update G02 regarding the which application should be used. And I'm thinking here specifically of the Form 5 application for grading, shoring, and excavation and fill. There is nowhere that I've been able to find codified in the code where the code codifies what those applications are for, when they're intended to be used. And in addition to that, I think an information sheet from DBI around shoring and underpinning and what the process is for that would be really useful and beneficial to applicants.
Okay, David, thank you for those questions here. Firstly, we've hired engineers to replace engineers that are leaving. So we actually have a net decrease of engineering staff than we did when I first got here. So I just want to let you know that the movement that we've been getting are largely people backfilling other positions that have left, and there's been a little bit of a promotional opportunity here recently. Totally understand your perspective on architectural review. All of our plan reviewers, inspectors, or engineers are capable of doing architectural review. And one thing Jimmy is doing as the new plan check manager is making sure that happens consistently across the board. We've had a couple of internal conversations about that. David Jones, the new over-the-counter plan check manager, is also making sure that gets done on the second floor as well. So appreciate your comment on that, but we still have vacancies to fill, and hopefully the economy will allow us to do that fairly soon. Regarding the G2 and which applications to use on your specific issue, I'll point you to the section that tells you it's actually in Appendix J with the grading chapter of the building code that says that any excavation under an existing building or any excavation something to do with the fact that that's necessary to and that's necessary for or to construct a building is exempt from a grading permit. So you can imagine if you're digging out a basement to put a foundation for a building, that body of work underneath the building is exempt from a grading permit. And so I think that's the reason why you were told that a Form 5 is not appropriate there. Let me take your question about underpinning an existing foundation or an adjacent neighbor, or soil nails or soil anchors into adjacent properties. If you'll allow me to take that offline, I'll just give you a little bit hint in case anybody else knows. Here in this in San Francisco, we require a permit to be pulled on not only the subject property but also the adjacent property in order to get soil anchors that go into adjacent properties or under the public right of way. I have a different approach to that, and I've done it differently in previous jurisdictions that I would like to think about bringing to San Francisco, whereby we just leave permitting on the subject property and initiate some sort of an encumbrance or a deed restriction, not a deed restriction, but a recorded document on the adjacent property so that future owners know that there's some infrastructure under their property that's associated with the next property. That makes the permitting a little easier, and it doesn't force the adjacent neighbor to necessarily go into a permitting scenario when they're not necessarily the instigators of that construction. Hopefully that makes sense, David. This is just a thought in my mind. It's not, and if it's appealing to you, let's talk about it and maybe move it forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I actually, having done it so much, I have a fairly good understanding of the process, but it just seems like one of those things that it is a little confusing. So it would be great to have just like a, written down from DBI for the more general applicant pool. But that's what you're talking about. Sounds amazing. And thank you very much for pointing me to the Appendix H, I believe. That's great. I'll take a look at that. I appreciate
It's
that.
J. It's J.
Jay,
Appendix
thank
J.
you.
Great. Thank you, Neville. Thank you, David. Do we have any more questions? Let's see. Let's check the chat. I don't see any more hands raised. Looks like we don't have any more questions from our audience.
So we have one more presentation on the new permit issuance stamp, I believe, Kelly.
Yes.
Okay, if we could just go on to the next slide. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'll make this quick. Many of you noticed that DBI has a new permit issuance stamp. The previous one essentially says San Francisco Department of Building Inspection approved with the date on it. And now we've got this wonderful piece of art that depicts the city's skyline in the downtown area. And there are a couple of reasons for this thing. It was about time we did a fresh new design, new look. Part of DBI reinventing itself is looking at new ways for depicting itself, and there's more of this to come, hopefully in the future. It's also to be able to clarify the nomenclature on the stamp, whereas it said it was approved. This stamp goes on the permit application as well as the approved plans or the plans that we were issued. And so it just clarified that nomenclature and said that it represents an issued document, a permit that's issued. And lastly, well, so you remember that the director's signature was also associated with the old stamp as well. And there was some confusion. I had at least a half dozen calls that asked me to look into, this Director O'Riordan or Director Hui that may have issued something inappropriately or whatever. And I had to let them know, well, they didn't really approve those drawings. They were just, their names were associated with the stamp. And so there's no legal reason to have the director's signature on the stamp. And so we just removed it to remove any confusion. And lastly, we have about 24 of these stamps out on the floor, some of which were really difficult to use. And so now we have new ergonomic stamps for staff to use where there's not a lot of stress on their, when they're stamping documents and so on and so forth. So those are the reasons behind changing the issuance stamp. Are there any questions about that? Janine.
Hi, I don't have any questions about this stamp, but is there going to be an opportunity for just general questions about new processes?
Sure. Yeah, you can go ahead and ask that question now.
Thank you very much. I'm with Luminalt, and we have been installing solar and battery energy storage systems in San Francisco since 2004. And so we've been around for 20 years. The electrical division and the fire department launched a process where, or a requirement that the San Francisco Fire Department inspect PV systems and battery energy storage systems And there is no process that has been shared with contractors for us to follow. So we have a number of projects that are just stuck. Now,
Janine.
we were able to get through a process of something where we were able to get one inspection out of 14 projects, but we're stuck.
Yeah. Kathy, I'm going to have you start, and then I can.
Yeah, I can
or
address
start,
that.
you
So
tell me,
Kathy
yeah.
Harold Fire Department. So I'm assuming these are projects where permits have already been issued, but the projects were never reviewed by the fire department?
Permits were issued. There are electric permits that are over the counter for under 4 kilowatts or of PV or under 20 kilowatt hours of battery energy storage. And so, yeah, these are systems that have been installed, permitted, installed, and we've been told that we cannot get an electrical inspection until we have a fire inspection.
Okay. So that, I mean, there's a couple of different scenarios out there. So one in 2013, it was added to the California Fire Code that a construction permit's required for solar voltaic, and so that's the time that the fire department started regulating, reviewing, and inspecting that requirement. That is when that first started. So. So there are some permits that were issued that the fire department did not get to review. If you have those that need to be, if you have those permits that were issued without the fire department's review, you can bring them to our fire counter and sign in, and we'll review them at the counter. If you have a stack of, if you have like 7 or more permits that we need to review, you can, at our second floor counter, hand them over for in-house review, and we'll get to them hopefully within a day or two.
That is not my forgive me, but that is not my experience. So last Friday was the first time that anybody in fire over at SF DBI was able to receive us to do a review. And so my colleague waited in line and was able to get one reviewed, then was sent to the back of the line to get another one reviewed. And this is last Friday, and then went upstairs and handed the remainder of the remaining 5 that he had, and we don't have those back yet. So it is not a day process. And so if this is something that was issued in 2013, why was it implemented without a process, without talking with electrical, when electrical has been doing online electrical permits, which is for years?
Okay, so for years, electrical routes those plans to the fire department for review.
They're for over, according to SFDBI's requirements that have been in place since 2007, and under 4 kilowatt. I'm not trying to be difficult, but this is excruciatingly painful because it's the end of the year and everybody expects their tax credits, and people are going nuts on us because we can't tell them when their systems are going to be inspected, because we have no idea. So we got we've then you get fire review. Once you get it, I mean, the process doesn't make sense because it doesn't align.
Okay, so fire department just became aware of the problem Friday afternoon, Monday morning. So a process was put in place to expedite the review of these projects that the fire department wasn't able to look at or hadn't looked at. So we have a process in place now that you can come to our counter and we can review your project during the day. If you have a lot that need to be reviewed, you can check them in. We're setting up our staff to have these reviewed after hours, and we're going to expedite them as quickly as we can. We're not sure how many we're going to get, but we're marking them high
Probably
priority. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
But so is there some way that we can have some sort of a forum where you can talk with contractors either through CALSA or trade organization or something wherein there can be a process that has been explained to contractors that is somewhere so that staff at SFDBI and staff at the fire department understands what the process is and aligns that process together. I'm going to make the same comment at the fire commission tonight too, because I'm not sure what to do at this point.
So, Janine, Kathy is exactly right that this issue has just recently surfaced, and both fire department and DBI are looking to address the active projects out there as quickly as we can. You've heard Kathy Harrell talk about these OTC opportunities to get them done immediately in front of you, unless you have a lot of them. Meanwhile, we are addressing the issues on new permits that come through and make sure that the fire department is properly notified from the onset that they need to review these and they need to inspect them.
So how, forgive me, but how does fire inspect an electrical permit that is received online without any plans? Because that is what the process has been since 2007.
Yeah, and you're right about that. I was just thinking about that. That should be an exception. And again, Kathy and I need the fire department and the DBI need to work this out, whether those would continue to be exempted. But if not, we'll work that out.
So we're talking about changing established precedent that has been in place since 2007 without notifying any contractors at year end, right before. So this is pretty painful.
yeah, so we're not changing any requirement in the fire code. So I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, and like I said, Jenny, we know of this issue right now. We're aggressively dealing with it internally to figure out what how to address it.
Okay, so Kathy, I mean, what's the next step here?
So if you have projects that you want reviewed by the fire department tomorrow, bring them to our counter and we can review them over the counter. When you sign in, you can have up to an hour review. After that review, you'll need to sign back in again, or you can give us your projects over the counter and we'll review them in-house and get them back to you as soon as we can.
Okay, and so there's no service level commitment. It's just as soon as you can. And so now we have to have a plan set for electrical permits in order for fire to have something to review.
No, these do not need to be drafted, stamped, signed plans.
But the district inspectors won't inspect unless there's a fire stamp on the plans. They won't issue a job card.
Okay, so I mean, I think because of time, if we can speak directly tomorrow, I can help you work out. Okay.
Perfect.
So
is there great? I'll give you a call. Thank you.
Okay. You have my number?
I do.
Okay. I'll be in by 8 tomorrow. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Anne. We have a question in the chat from Jeremy Paul who says, Once a property is approved for use of the CHBC, the applicability is no longer discretionary. I don't understand DBI and fire treating this like a menu.
Okay, so Jeremy, when you say it's no longer discretionary, you're right. The building has been determined to be a historical building, and then the provisions of the historical building code come in. It still needs plan review, and it still needs to discern whether the building in concert with everything that needs to be done from a external building envelope perspective. I pretty much said that's we're pretty much hands off of that. The building envelope, the existing stair from within, we've got to determine how that affects the new occupancy. Now all of a sudden you don't have people that are alert between 7 and 6 and actively engage in commerce or building. You have people that are potentially unconscious, elderly people, young people, and stuff like that. So the building, it doesn't become a ministerial approval. And maybe I'm not understanding your question properly. We still need to review it.
Great. Thank you, Neville. Next, we have a question from Janine Cotter. Janine, take it away.
I think Janine didn't put her hand
I
down.
think I put that. I just didn't put my hand down. I think I've added, I've taken enough of this people's time. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Anna, looks like you have your hand raised.
Okay. Thank you. I need to bring up this subject because I've done a lot of mitigation on path of travels. And what I'm faced with now in trying to help Civil get this permit approved is that it's a T-shaped street where there's already an established path of travel that goes from one side to the other and from the bus stop and everything. It seems that DPW is requesting just a 20-foot distance away, another curb ramp to connect to the T-shape so it forms a intersection or whatever on a T-shaped street. What this does in working with some of the nonprofit clients, it adds the burden on him, and there's a driveway. It's in a residential area, and there's a driveway in the middle of this second means of path of travel. And what this would require is doing this at an angle to not interfere with the driveway and to relocate the manhole. And so I'm seeing what there isn't yet established is a way to talk through these issues, to present them if they're not looking at it totally, the impact. And I don't know if that process is built in because it's this back and forth. And I know within Bluebeam, you can have these online discussions and talk with the plans there and come to an agreement. Is there some way that we can address that issue if there's a path of travel already established and that they want another one 20 feet away, of whether or not we can mitigate this by just keeping the staff of travel there, putting in the drop-off area, the curb ramp required for a disabled person that's dropping off their kids to use that curb ramp. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt there because we
Sure.
we typically don't use this forum to talk about individual
Okay.
projects.
Right.
If you can email me directly, I'm actually
Sure.
not in the office tomorrow, but I will make sure that this gets addressed.
My
for you.
apologies. My apologies. But I just wanted to let you know is that give you this an example as a means of adding some chat within your system that you've developed. I just gave that as an example. I'll handle it. But I wanted to give you this as an example to negotiate, to make sure that the project, everything aligns with the project. That's all I'm saying. is that, can you take a look at that so we can have a chat session to work out difficult?
Yeah. And just for clarification, and what I propose as far as asynchronous use of Bluebeam doesn't prohibit alternate means of communication between the plan checker and the design professional. You will using the permit review roundtable, you will get direct phone numbers of all the plan checkers for that process. And I know this is not specific to your particular concern here, but there are always ways of communicating with the plan checker. So
Your
okay.
plan checkers are available. It's DPW plan checkers are not available. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
just letting you know that. And I hope this
Okay.
process that you've established incorporates that. Thank you.
Okay. Kelly, Patrick Cannon.
Yes. Any final call for questions? All right, I'll hand the mic over to Patrick Cannon.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining us and for your questions. If you have any follow-up comments, you can send them to dbi.communications@sfgov.org. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you at the next DBI Public Advisory Forum on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. See you then.